And that's why people don't understand violence. They don't understand its purpose or its function. No, I might not be too wise about a lot of things, but there are a couple things I know for sure.
And they are?
One is that I love violence. I love watching it. I love movies with violence. And I refuse to watch any movies that don't have violence in it. Number two is I want you to shut your fucking mouth so we can relax, have a nice meal, and watch a movie, okay? More wine, anyone?
Welcome to the Cvrtcast.
Yeah, we're just talking about your body of work mainly, especially your work with Bloodlust and Pearls Before Swine, which is the main film we're covering right now. And yeah, like your background with the Hellfire Club and your history as a director of Muff. Can you give us a brief summary and like how, just a brief history if you can, please?
Of course. I'm an independent filmmaker from Australia. I started making films in the 1980s when I was a teenager. I began working with a guy called Mark Savage, who, I don't know if you're familiar with his work.
I am. I used to cover some of his movies for Spoiled Cinema on my website. Back.
So he's been living in America for the last 10, 15 years. And but when we were younger, he was about 8 years older than me. So he was in his 20s in the 1980s, and he made a film called Marauders. And we'd worked on some Super 8 shorts together, and he made this film Marauders, which is a great film. It's part of a box set called Savage Cinema from Down Under. I think that's the only place you can get it. It's a very rare film. Because I think a couple of people who own it don't particularly want it to be released anymore. Not me. I love it. I wish it had a special Blu-ray or 4K release, but maybe one day it will. And we worked on some Super 8s, and then Mark wanted to make his first feature, and we all worked at this video production company called South Pacific Video. So, he got the equipment out on the weekend, and we would just shoot on weekends for about 6 months. We shot that film. I was one of the producers of the film. I had an acting role in it. I was sort of, Mark's general assistant on that, and that was the first time I'd worked on a feature film. I was 16, 17. It was made in 1986. And then after that, I obviously finished school and all that kind of normal things that one does. And then, I got various jobs working at video production houses. And when I was around 20, I met John Hewitt, who was 10 years older than me. And he was somebody who wanted to make a film, get into filmmaking and stuff. And he was in film distribution. So which was obviously, that's helpful if you want to make a film, right? And so you have a friend who's in distribution. So we decided to collaborate on a film called Bloodlust, which was my first feature, which I co-directed with John, co-produced, co-wrote. It was very much a collaboration a la the Coen brothers, or one of those, collaboratory directorial projects that, were around at that time. It was inspired by the film Near Dark. And other kind of crazy vampire films that we'd seen over the years. We wanted to combine the genres of the gangster kind of genre and the vampire genre, and which at the time we took it to the funding bodies down here in Australia, and they were like, "Who the hell wants to see this kind of film?" But as a film critic who reviewed the film 10 years later said, "Well, this is like From Dusk Till Dawn, except it was like 5 years before From Dusk Till Dawn, where Rodriguez and Tarantino made a kind of gangster vampire film." So, it was sort of ahead of its time, maybe. And, in America, that kind of filmmaking is embraced. But in Australia, you're considered something of a pariah to make that kind of film. And, the next kind of film we wanted to make, John Hewitt and I wrote a script called Nemesis, which is a serial killer script, which remains unproduced. And this was in 1991. And again, the funding bodies were like, who the hell wants to see a film, that's like a serial killer movie or whatever, And then, of course, the following year, Silence of the Lambs won an Oscar. So we were like, everybody in the whole fucking world wants to see it. That's who. So, we were sort of, ahead of the game, John and I. So after that script, Nemesis, didn't happen, I started a thing called the Hellfire Club, which was a kind of a nightclub, S&M, sadomasochism. I had a girlfriend in Los Angeles, a Jewish girl by the name of Regan Kibbe, who she was about 8 years older than me, and she picked me up at a bookstore, the Amok bookstore in Los Angeles, and we became lovers. And we went to research events, with like body piercing and Bob Flanagan and people nailing themselves to boards, all this kind of extreme kind of S&M behavior. Of course, I'm from Australia. I'd never seen anything like this, and it sort of opened my eyes to this whole kind of, depraved LA scene, which at the time I thought was kind of interesting. And I still do find it interesting. And so, after, I had an affair with her and, I think I went back another time and then saw her again. And again, the scene over there was kind of very, going off. So when I came back, I opened this club, the Hellfire Club, and it became, really successful. It became one of the coolest nightclubs in Melbourne. And, I opened it in Melbourne and Sydney, and it just became massive. Huge deal, and I made a lot of money out of that. I ran it in Melbourne and Sydney and did that for about 10 years. And then, got involved in all kinds of activities there, including some, I guess we can talk about it, whatever, lots of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that kind of stuff. Maybe more, not rock and roll, electronic music, sex, drugs, and electronic music. And it was in that kind of world that I came up with the idea for Pearls Before Swine, which, I was a fan of Boyd Rice before I contacted him. And I just, he was actually a friend of a guy called Douglas P. from a band called Death in June. And Douglas lived over in Adelaide. And he was over there recording an album. So I went over there with the script. And we sat down and read it together. And he gave me some ideas because it was quite a collaborative effort, Pearls Before Swine, between me and Boyd. And, he said he wanted to do it. He said, if I flew him out and, gave him a bit of money and, just looked after him in that period. And as I said, I was making good money from running the Hellfire Club. I also had a producer partner, a Greek guy who ran a Laserdisc shop called George Pavlidis. He put some money into the film and we went ahead and did it.
You mentioned that earlier that in the Australian world of film is kind of more stuffy, a bit more of, I guess, less open than the American film world. Were you nervous in certain regards when it came to like political affiliations with Boyd Rice or Death in June, the imagery and the stuff like that when it comes to like, kind of more of an extreme look? Were you concerned with that?
I was making, I had friends who were lawyers and I was making more money than them running nightclubs, the people who were, I was making $5,000 a week at least. And so, I was doing very well. So I didn't give a shit, you know what I mean? I didn't give a shit about like being politically incorrect or whatever. And, the artists that I admired, always provocative artists, I liked artists across the spectrum. I like left-wing filmmakers. I like right-wing filmmakers. I like, people who made, particularly I like people who made, genre films. I like John Waters, for example, a lot. I love David Lynch. I love David Cronenberg. John Waters is a gay guy or whatever and makes these really transgressive films. I'm sure you totally know his work, but I loved his stuff and thought it was great. And he didn't seem to give a shit about what people thought. And I just thought that was what an artist should do, I had an interest in, kind of right-wing politics a bit. And it was sort of, how would you describe it? In that period, it was kind of, very risque, to make that kind of film, particularly in Australia, where it's all very politically correct and everything. But I just thought, fuck it, I'll just... And, I shot it in 1996. It took me about 2 or 3 years to finish it in post, because this is always a problem. I tend to shoot my films when I've got enough money to shoot them, but then I don't have enough money to actually finish them. But I figure at least it's shot, and I'll finish it one day. And that I have always finished every film I've started. So that's it does work, but sometimes it takes longer. But it premiered at the Stockholm International Film Festival in 1999. Roman Polanski was there with his film The Ninth Gate. The film Fight Club was premiering there as well. People sort of said Pearls Before Swine was like a low-budget Fight Club. It's a similar kind of thing. Like Fight Club explores a new kind of fascistic, fascistic ode to violence, I guess you could say. And my version is like a low budget fascistic ode to violence. So, and Polanski saw it and, I'd been introduced to him, but we never really spoke. But on the last night of the Stockholm International Film Festival in 1999, he was giving away Best Director on it, and Dario Argento was there. And I'd met Dario Argento, who's a really nice guy, but he had some, hot 25-year-old he was with. And they said to him, "Oh, you're going to give away Best Film." And he said, "Oh no! I get stage fright. I don't like to do this." And I thought, "Fuck, Dario Argento doesn't want to give away best film." So they said, "What guest have we got that's not giving away a film?" And I said, "We haven't got Richard giving away anything." They said, "All right, we'll get Richard to give away best film." So anyway, Polanski gets up and here's best director. And here's Roman Polanski to give away best director. Because he gets up, gives away best director. He comes off stage, and then they say, "And from Australia, here is Australian film director Richard Wolstencroft to give away best film." Apparently, Roman Polanski, I heard this later, said, "Who the fuck is Richard Wolstencroft?" Because I was like, no, he's Roman fucking Polanski. Who was Richard Wolstencroft, right? So, I give away best film. So there was a party afterwards at this friend of Polanski's place. And he said, "Look, invite this prick." You know what I mean? So I get invited, and it's snowing and everything, and Polanski's rolling joints, and we have a joint and everything. But I walk out onto this beautiful balcony. It's like a multi-million-dollar mansion with it's just huge. And Polanski follows me out. And, so I said, what am I going to talk to him about? So we talk about film, we were both in Fight Club. So I said, what do you think of Fight Club? He says, I'm watching Fight Club, the first 20 minutes. I think I'm watching one of the best film I see. You see the price of things, the capitalism or critique. And he just goes into this fucking in-depth review of Fight Club. That's the best review of Fight Club I've ever heard in my life. You know what I mean? Like, spot on, nails it. And he says, but, I think the director, near the end, he loses, he is drawn too big a picture, and he's beginning to lose control of his subject matter. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of right, And, it was great. And, we just got along great, and we spoke for about, 20, 30 minutes. And it was snowing, so we decided to go back inside. And just on the way back in, I grabbed his hand and said, "And by the way, mate, you're a fucking legend."
It's awesome.
There we go. That's my Polanski story.
And now he knows who you are.
That is awesome.
Yeah, well, I guess so if he remembers it. Yeah. But he had friends there. But yeah. I'm sure if you heard this, he'd probably be reminded of it. But yeah, no, we got along great. And, so after that, I toured Pearls Before Swine around. We took it to Sick which was great. I think Christopher Nolan was there that year. I mean, his career was just beginning with that. What's the name of that first film he made? Following. I think he was there.
Yeah,
if you look at the catalog for 2000, or I can't remember if it was 2000 or 2001. I think it was 2001 I went to Sick because in 2000, I entered the film in the Melbourne International Film Festival. And they said, no, we don't want to play it. And I said, well, it just premiered at the Stockholm International Film Festival. Why is it not good enough for, the city it was kind of filmed in? Obviously they didn't like its politics. They didn't like how it was violent and blah, blah, blah. I had a filmmaker friend called Philip Brophy. I'd say a friend, but more of an associate who I'd met around the traps. I admired his work. He made a film called Body Melt. I'm sure you might know that film. And he reached out and tried to get them to play my film, but they weren't interested. And so I thought, fuck these people. And again, I still had a lot of money. I was still, at the tail end of. I mean, Hellfire was beginning to sort of die off a little, so I began to kind of want to move away from nightclubs. Plus, just all the partying I did in the 90s. You know what I mean? Like, I was like one of the Gallagher brothers, mate. It was terrible. And, and I just wanted to get away from it because I thought it'll kill me if I don't get away from it. So I decided to go back to university and study philosophy, which I did. And I had a lot of money, so I was like, well, I can do whatever I want for a while, So, and I'll make a new film and etc. And then in that milieu, I decided to found the Melbourne Underground Film Festival because I wrote this letter and said my film had not been accepted into MIF, and I thought it was outrageous that it was shot. I had all these great actors from Australia. And then a whole bunch of filmmakers wrote back to me and said, look, my film's the same, or, I made this low-budget film. One of the filmmakers that wrote to me was James Wan, who went on to become one of the biggest horror filmmakers of the last 25 years. He made a film called Stygian. He made it with a guy called Lee Winnell and another guy called Shannon Young. And they all, had their film played in First Muff. We gave it Best Guerrilla Film. He's a great guy. Has done some great work. And there are a lot of other. Patrick Hughes had his first film played in Muff 1. He went on to, work with Samuel L. Jackson in that film, The Hitman's Girlfriend, and he directed one of The Expendables. Greg McLean had an early short of his played there. He went on to do Wolf Creek. So, it became a very Promethean a film festival for at least the first 10 or 15 years, where so many important filmmakers out of this country had their first film played at MUF. So I can say that about James Wan, Patrick Hughes, I think Greg McLean, and many others. Scott Ryan, of course, we played his early film, The Magician, in around 2004, 2003, very early on, and that was before Nash Edgerton turned it into he expanded it and got some money for it. And then, of course, they made that show, Mr. In Between. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's one of the best TV shows out of Australia ever made, and it's a crime show. Which if you haven't seen it, you just got to go see it. It's called Mr. In Between, and it's a masterpiece.
What are some of your favorite Australian filmmakers and films? All of Australian film history, whether like the new wave or exploitation.
I love what's called Ozploitation. There is a filmmaker called Mark Hartley in Australia who made a documentary about that. I can't remember its name. Not from Hollywood or something like that. Not quite Hollywood or something. It's called.
Yeah, that's it.
And it's a documentary about the classic years of Australian genre filmmaking. Filmmakers like George Miller, who did Mad Max. Peter Weir, The Cars That Ate Paris. Brian Trenchard Smith. One of my favourite Australian films growing up was a film called Turkey Shoot, which was was set in a kind of fascist future where there's like this kind of prison problem. It's kind of very Trump-like future, right? And then there's these kind of immigrants or people who society doesn't want, and then they release them from this jail, and then they hunt them down like animals. And I just thought, this is just fucking incredible. It's my favourite Australian film to this day. And I tell Brian Trenchard Smith, who's on my Facebook page, that I think it's the best Australian film ever made. And he's like, "Oh God, do you really?" But I think it is. I think it's fantastic. It's completely transgressive. It's completely politically incorrect. And my friend John Hewitt actually remade it. And I was the first unit director on that. But he actually, to be honest, I mean, obviously, when John, I really wanted to remake it, but when John remade it, he sort of made it like. How would you describe it? Like The Running Man, and whereas
like
I would have kept
action.
Yeah, he made it like a big. Go ahead.
I was gonna say like a direct-to-video type action film.
Exactly. I was a little bit disappointed. I didn't think he did the right thing. I mean, I would have kept the fascist dystopian concentration camp theme, and I would have had people like Boyd Rice in it, and I would have got every right-wing kind of maniac. But I did work with. I suggested having Roger Ward in the film. Roger Ward was one of the main villains from the original Turkey Shoot, and he plays a sort of a dictator who gets assassinated near the start of the film. But I got to know Roger Ward working on that, and then when I did my new film, which is called The Debt Collector, which is on Amazon, you can order it off Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime. It's on various screening platforms. You just put in The Debt Collector and John Brumpton. You can watch that film. And Roger Ward has one of the major parts in that, which was great. We shot that in 2017, and it took me, like with Pearls Before Swine, it took me 3 years to finish. Actually, with the pandemic, it took me longer because I had the sound mixes up the country, and everybody was locked down, and we couldn't get up to Castlemaine to do the sound mix. So there you go. Can you just talk amongst yourselves just for like 1 minute? I've just got to turn off my alarm because it's going off in my room and it's annoying me.
Absolutely.
I can hear it in the background. Talk amongst yourselves.
Do a little filibustering where we could sit here and be quiet.
I like dead air. I
just remembered a cool fascist Australian film nobody knows about. It's called Marinetti, after the futurist Marinetti. But it's like this 60s, 70s countercultural tour. I think his name is Albie Toms, surfer related. But Marinetti, cool film, bunch of naked like counterculture chicks. Actually set during it says like, or you can say right wing hippie. I don't know, but it's a cool.
Isn't it, mate? I think I've seen that film. We played it at MUF 1 year. Obviously, when I founded the Melbourne Underground Film Festival, I was able to play. We played George Miller's The History of Violence. That was his first film he made before Mad Max. I'm sure most of you haven't seen that. We were able to play a lot of really interesting genre films. We played all the genre films from that are not quite Hollywood. Mark Hartley actually worked on my film Bloodlust. He has a little part in it, and he was like. They were young guys at the time. They were even younger than me. I was 21 when I made Bloodlust, and they were like 18, 19 or something. So that was one of the first films they worked on, and a guy called Louis Da Silva and Mark Hartley, they worked on it, and they helped us out. And so Mark made that documentary, and someone should do a film about the new wave of Australian genre filmmaking, because there's been a lot the last 30 years. Obviously, starting with myself, people like Mark Savage. filmmakers like Paul Moda. There's recently there's Shannon Young. There's obviously James Wan. And
what's the guy that just did the movie in the order? That's like he's more international now. He did a version of Macbeth. He's like he's Australian, but he's been working internationally.
Is that Gregor Jordan?
What was it? He did like what is it? Snowtown.
That's different director than the Macbeth. I think is Gregor Jordan. You need to look that up. Just go to International Movie to just see Macbeth, and it starred the guy who was in, who worked with James Cameron on that stupid film where there's the people are blue and they're running around like it's all very faggy.
One film you recommended that was great was The Informers, though. That was another Australian director. Informers, Bret Easton Ellis, underrated Ellis adaptation.
Actually, I might have had a hand in actually help in that film, The Canyons, that Bret Easton Ellis did, because I did this film called The Beautiful and Damned, which was an adaptation of a novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald, because I wanted to actually do a Bret Easton Ellis novel after doing Pearls Before Swine, but I didn't have the money, right, and I didn't know Bret Easton Ellis. But I realized that F. Scott Fitzgerald had come into public domain because he died in 1940, and his work was written before that. So I realized that The Beautiful and Damned, a novel he wrote about a young couple who just like to party all the time and are waiting around for an inheritance. And he's got this moralistic grandfather. And I thought, well, I can move this in time. And instead of having it about like prohibition and alcohol, I can make it all about, all the drug scene and all the fun I had in the 1990s. And so I thought that's what I'll do. And about a young couple who doesn't want to work, he just wants to party all the time and have a good time. And so I made this film, The Beautiful and Damned. I dedicated it to Bret Easton Ellis, and then a lawyer friend of mine knew Bret Easton Ellis. So when I went to LA with the film one time, he introduced us, and I had lunch with Bret Easton Ellis, and we got along great. And I gave him the film, and I said, "Look, I made it for like fucking next to nothing, for like $50,000 or something." And he was working with Paul Schrader on some film. I think it was called Bait. It was some film about a shark. And it didn't seem like it was something that would be that great, but I thought the two of them working together. But that film didn't happen. It didn't fall through. I don't know. Obviously, there are many people making these low-budget films, but he might have been inspired by The Beautiful and Damned, where he just said, "Look, why don't we just do something? I'll write a script quickly, and we'll crowdfund it or whatever." And obviously they have great reputations, both of them. So he wrote a script, and Schrader came on as director, and then they crowdfunded it for around $300,000, and they went off and shot it. And I think it's a great little film. It's just come out on Vinegar Syndrome, a nice Blu-ray or DVD copy of it. So The Canyons,
I always liked it. I thought The Canyons was great. I remember when it came out, everybody trashed that film. Like, unequivocally, it was trashed. But I always thought it was good, fitting the zeitgeist or whatever you were going to say, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Bret Easton Ellis has always had his finger on the pulse, and I love his work, and we got to know each other. I went to he came out to Australia. I think he just released that film, the book Imperial Bedrooms, which was a sequel to Less Than Zero. And he was doing a book tour. And, by that stage I knew him, and, we exchanged emails. He said, I've got to go to some fucking awful party. And, obviously I know everybody who's sort of cool in Melbourne. And I said, look, I'll throw you a party at this really cool restaurant called Fog, and, we'll have a big night out kind of thing. I thought I got a party with Bret Easton Ellis, right? So I organized this restaurant. I say, look, this is the greatest, living author. And the restaurant put on the, I think it was like the publicist paid for the food, but the alcohol was free or something. So we all got really drunk, and a friend of mine who had a nightclub called Red Benny's around the corner, and someone scored some coke, and we were doing coke with Bret Easton Ellis. That was great.
Hell yeah!
There you go. That's like having a drink with Ernest Hemingway, mate. So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
What's your relationship, if any, aside from the film, with Douglas P. and Death in June? And what do you think about neo-folk in general?
Well, I'm a big fan of Douglas P. We haven't really been in contact too much the last 10 or 15 years, but we were always on friendly terms. He's a very... he's an unusual guy, you know what I mean? He lives in this kind of over in Adelaide, but he is very prolific and produces very unique music. And I always found him fascinating, and he was really funny. This is one thing about Boyd and Doug. They have this kind of austere kind of vaguely neo-fascist kind of, but they're really, really funny, and they love all kinds of culture that you would not think they like. And obviously, Douglas P is gay, so he's got his own unique take on it all. And I've always got along with him. I've never really fallen out with either Doug or Boyd. Boyd had a little role in a film I did called The Second Coming. After I did The Beautiful and Damned, I made a documentary called The Last Days of Joe Blow, which is about the pornography business. It's been released from Monster Pictures. You can get that there. You can watch it online. It's available to watch online. And that was based on the life of a guy called Michael Tierney, who was the nephew of Lawrence Tierney from Reservoir Dogs, who, of course, is, you're Mr. White, you're Mr. Black, you're Mr. Blue. You know that guy? Right? That actor? I mean, it's iconic, that scene. And Michael was really like his son. It was his nephew, but it was like his son. And he was the only person, he's the guy who inherited his estate. He still gets money, for example, from the Reservoir Dog residuals, because I think Lawrence Tierney got a point in the film or something, which is, a lot of money. That film's made a lot of money. And so, he's over living in Thailand at the moment. But he told me around 2006, around the time I did The Beautiful and Damned, he said, I'm going to get into porn. I'm like, okay, He'd made an independent film called Evicted, and he's a handsome guy. He came out for the first muff, and we got along great. He's a handsome guy, and I thought, okay, well, you're going to go do porn. That's interesting. I've always been fascinated by that world. When I've been to LA, I've been to LA heaps, but I used to hang out with William Margold, who was a porn movie kind of, the godfather of porn. He wrote a lot about the history of pornography. We were quite friendly. So, when he started doing that, he worked in the industry for about 5 years, and then he said, I think I'm going to get out, because it's, it's a bit like nightclubs. There's just a lot of decadence and depravity that can consume you if you don't sort of, get out. So he wanted to leave the industry. And I said, well, before you leave, I'll make a documentary about you. So I flew over there, and we got this kind of, Gonzo, Hunter S. Thompson, we were taking porn stars out, on the town, and God Almighty, if we'd shot behind the scenes, that'd be even wilder than the documentary. But we got up to all kinds of no good. Let's put it that way. And we shot this documentary. We had rooms at the Chateau Marmont, and we were taking porn stars back there. It's fucking unbelievable. And that was very interesting. We shot that film. Mark Savage did a little bit of second unit on that for me. He shot some lovely scenes of LA, and then. He retired to Thailand, so I went over there and shot. And once he'd actually left the porn scene, I think he liked Thailand because, obviously it was a decadent place, much like Los Angeles, and, women were easily, He said, one of the things after becoming a porn star, he didn't know how to pick up women anymore, because he said it's like a lion, that's constantly given meat in captivity. Once you're set free from the zoo, the lion's going to die because he no longer knows how to hunt. You know what I mean? So that's how he compared him to that. But in Thailand, obviously, if anyone with $30 can get laid over there, mate, and so that's what he was up to, and that was a good time there. But around that time, I got $100,000 from a producer in Australia to make that documentary about the porn business, and I travelled overseas 2 or 3 times to make that, and I thought, fuck it, I'm going to make another film at the same time. So I made this film called The Second Coming. And Boyd Rice is in that. Jim Goad is in that. I'm sure if you know who Jim Goad is. We had Kim Fowley. He had a part in it. Giddle Partridge, Pete Doherty from the Libertines turned up when we shot in London. A guy named Jerome Alexander played a part in the film, playing a gothic kind of guy obsessed with Mark Bolan and black magic, and he was best friends with Pete Doherty, and Pete Doherty was there, and we hung out with him, and we smoked crack with Pete Doherty. That's again like,
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah, we smoked crack with Pete Doherty. It's the only time I've ever done crack, and he felt really bad. He was like, I said, have you done this before? I go, no, I've never done it before. And he said, oh, look, I feel bad. If I switch you on the crack, you might become a crack addict. I said, give it to me. I'm going to try it. So,
never tried crack.
It was great. It was fucking great, man. And I had a really good night, but never did it again, So I'd be lucky like that, actually. I can actually, participate in these activities, but then switch it off, It's not like I haven't never gone through periods of my life where I have partied too hard. I definitely have. But for whatever reason, I'm able just to switch off and, particularly when there's a movie I want to make or something I want to concentrate on, then I realize that, it's best not to have any, I don't really drink much, but I can drink, it's like I just got back from Bali and I got roaring drunk one night over there and we did karaoke and that whole stupidity. And, but, I'm not a daily drinker. I don't smoke marijuana. I mean, but I can, if you offered me a joint now, I probably would. But,
Polanski's a pothead. You mentioned Polanski was rolling joints.
Absolutely, he was rolling joints. He loved it, man. He loved it, and
I'm not surprised.
there wasn't anything good with that, but I imagine he would have been into that too. I really liked him. This is before all that, stuff. I mean, obviously, I had heard about that thing that he got involved in with the teenager in the 70s, but it was not a big deal. Like cancel culture wasn't really around at that stage, and people again really admired controversial artists and stuff, and. I thought Polanski was fantastic, and he's one of the greatest living directors. I thought The Ninth Gate, the film he made, was really great. It was about book collecting, and I'm a book collector myself, so I could really relate to it.
Me too.
Yeah, I love collecting rare books, and and I've been doing that all my life. So, it was just fascinating, and so there it is. I got other stories if you want. I met George Clooney once. If you want to hear that story.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you smoke crack with George Clooney?
Yeah, make him smoke crack.
I did touch with George Clooney, yeah, definitely. And, this was in around 1997. He just made, you'd have to look it up when he did the Batman film. He did a tour of Australia, and I was running my nightclub, Hellfire Club, at a place called Saratoga. And I think we'd heard that he was in town, and we're wondering, I think we'd heard what nightclubs are going to get George Clooney, and he decides to turn up to the Hellfire Club. So, he's there, and of course we give him, free tickets and drink cards, and he said, look, I don't really want like candid photographs because he was hanging out with all these nefarious people, and but he says if you ask me. I'll pose for a photo with people. I said, well, that's reasonable. So I said to our photographer, Robin Dallimore, I said, look, Clooney's okay with photos, but we've got to ask. And that all seemed good. So, I gave him the run of the joint. He could go at the back and, have a few lines or whatever. And he had unlimited drink cards. So he's actually a nice guy. Over a few lines, we were like, he goes, I think I fucked up the Batman franchise. I don't think it worked. I mean, it's like a lay down. It was dead easy to do a Batman film, but somehow I think I fucked it up. And he was like, this was before he was like a real megastar. Like that was his first real big film because he'd done work with Tarantino and he'd done some good indie films, but he was not yet what you'd call George Clooney. I mean, I think about a year after that, he made some big other war movie, and then he just was this massive star. But he was quite self-deprecating. He was very nice. Anyway, so I got a photograph with him, and a couple other people there got photos with him. But then he was out on the dance floor dancing with this girl, and he had another girlfriend back in the States. And then the photographer who'd been told not to photograph him candidly did take a photo, and then he grabs the photographer and wants to punch him up, and and is like, I'm gonna beat you up or whatever, and then so our security get involved, and George, we all meet in the kind of back room, and George Clooney's there, and he wants to kill the photographer, and his name was Robin, so it was like Batman versus Robin, which was funny, and so what George Clooney said is, he said, give me the film from the camera, because it wasn't before digital, it was like actual film in the camera. So he wound the film out, he took it, he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to develop the film, and I'm going to give you the photos I approve of, and then the rest, the ones on the dance floor will be dancing, whatever, that I don't like, I'm going to keep. So I thought, well, this will never happen. But anyway, I said, good on you, George Clooney. Everyone wanted to keep him happy, so great, no trouble. So, he was staying at Crown Casino, so I think I was up all night, and it was like 6 or 7 a.m. Well, I got to about 8 or 9 a.m. I think he said to meet him at 10 a.m. I thought, there's no way he's going to be awake. But anyway, I rock on down to Crown Casino at like the time, 9:45, 10 a.m., and there's George Clooney waiting for me in the lobby, with the photographs that he got up at 8 a.m. He must have slept. He got them developed. He gave me the photographs, and then he kept the rest. And I just said, you're a nice guy. And that was it. That was the last time I ever saw him. So,
a man of his word.
Yeah, he was. And he's become all, Mr. PC and everything now. But, he liked the wild. I imagine they've got him blackmailed somehow, the poor guy. But, he's a nice guy. At least he was then. He was very self-deprecating. and just I mean, I met Ryan Gosling too in another strange incident. If you want to hear about that, God,
Yeah, please.
Yeah, we like
about
these ones. Yeah.
This story is officially weird, right? This is officially weird. Okay, so I'm in Thailand, right? I'm in Thailand, and I think I was shooting The Second Coming. No, maybe it was after that. Anyway, I think I was coming back from somewhere. If I'm coming back from Europe or going there, I often like to stop in Bangkok because Bangkok's one of the wildest cities on earth, and I like a wild time. So, I was there, and I don't know, I just had a massage or something, and I'm walking on the Cvrtcast road, and then around the corner walks Ryan Gosling, and I'm like, oh, but he's been followed by a camera crew, and I go, oh fuck, so I thought, well, don't look at him because that'll ruin the shot. So I didn't look at him, and I just sort of standing there, and then on the corner, and then I sort of follow. But I make out I'm just like somebody on the sidewalk, whatever, some Western degenerate or whatever, walking along in the background. So I thought, well, that's interesting. So then about 100 meters up the road, they stop, and Nicholas Winding Refn was there. He was directing, and it was the film Only God Forgives. Of course, I didn't know that at the time, but I went up to Ryan Gosling, who was just literally no one knew who he was. This is Bangkok. This is before he was before Barbie and all that stuff. So he was just standing on the side of the road, like, waiting for them to set up. And I said, by the way, you're a filmmaker and everything. And I said I knew his work from the Pusher trilogy, obviously, because he told me Nicholas Winding Refn was directing. I said, I know the Pusher trilogy. And he goes, that's why I wanted to work with Nicholas Winding Refn. So he introduced me to Nicholas Winding Refn. It was very rude and dismissive. He was like, oh, yeah, whatever, And I thought, well, he's directing. He's got a good excuse, So he wasn't interested in saying hello or anything. He was just, talking to his cameraman and, carrying on. And but I had about a 10-minute chat with Ryan Gosling, and again, really self-deprecating. He said, and I said, "What's this new film about?" He goes, "I don't fucking know, mate." He says, "I did Drive with him," and he said, "That's why I'm here, because Drive was obviously a big success, and that was the film that really made Ryan Gosling a star in many ways." And he just says, "I'm just here because I believe in Nicholas, and he's making jokes about him and everything." And it was just, and then when the film comes out. There's a scene in the film where Ryan Gosling's in a boxing joint, and then he leaves the boxing joint and he walks onto the Cvrtcast road, and there in the background I'm in the shot. So
oh, no way.
Amazing. What are the coincidences that I would end up in the background of a film by Nicholas Winding Refn starring Ryan Gosling? He's shot in Thailand. I mean, that was just the synchronicity of that. That's when you think there's something more going on. We're living in some kind of matrix or something. That was very, very strange. Yeah. And somebody put me in the credits as like an extra. Someone said, "I'm adding you to the credits now," and I'm in it. So about 2 seconds, but that's it. But anyway, so that was a very strange story. But I mean, look, I've been lucky. Obviously that was completely accidental. But through the Melbourne Underground Film Festival, I've met many great filmmakers, and we had Jim Van Bebber come out for the film festival at Muff. We hung out a lot here. He's a guy who likes to party hard, a la Sam Peckinpah. And he was hard to keep up with, mate. He even made me, getting a sweat keeping up with him. I'll tell you that. And we had Gene Gugolitz, was another interesting sort of writer, and he had a little part in my film, The Second Coming, which we shot. Part of it when we were in Australia. So, that's the one film of mine that's never had a commercial release. It's kind of a bit more avant-garde. It's a bit like, if you've seen that film Night of Cups by Terrence Malick.
Yes.
It's kind of like that. It's kind of about a meditative, because I told you I did that philosophy degree. It's kind of a very meditative, existential film. It's about a group of white magicians trying to bring on the end of the world, the second coming of Christ, and a group of black magicians who are trying to bring around the Antichrist. And it was originally going to be like 7 10-minute shorts that would make about an 80-minute film, but each short ended up being about half an hour long, so it ended up being 2 features. So, but I hope to get that released. Maybe Vinegar Syndrome will do it one day, or I just got to find the right label. It has an absolutely stellar cast. It's just a who's who of underground people. Adam Parfrey's in it from what's it called, Feral House.
We covered What Is It, which he was in with Crispin Glover recently. Actually, well,
I got a Crispin Glover story. If you want a Crispin Glover story, I'll tell you that, because we toured into Australia. he had his, he's got his traveling roadshow films he does. What Is It? And I can't remember the titles of the other ones, but he'd never been to Australia. And I said, well, Muff would like to bring you out. I think we were trying to get him to come out for the actual festival, but that didn't time with him. But he contacted me and said, I can come in whatever. I can't remember what month it was, but August or something like that, right? And I said, okay, let's do it. How much money do you need? And he told me, he takes a large part of the door. But I thought, well, it's reasonable, and obviously I just want to do it. I don't care if I don't make any money out of it. I just want to do it to meet Crispin Glover. So we set it all up, and we did it at the Westgarth Theatre in Westgarth in Melbourne. And he rocked up, and he's a vegan. He doesn't even eat food that's not even cooked. It's not more than vegan. It's even further than vegan. It's kind of basic vegan. raw vegetables, right? And we had to go to a special restaurant to get him all these special food and stuff. But he'd written lots of great essays. He had a lot of stories about people like Steven Spielberg, and I probably shouldn't share those stories, but you don't want to end up like Isaac Happy, if you know what I mean.
What about philosophy? You saying you had a degree in philosophy? I think you mentioned Heidegger in the before.
Yes.
But what are some of your philosophical influences?
Well, definitely Martin Heidegger, was a big influence on me. Nietzsche, Hegel, when I was making, too much money in the 1990s, I just bought, so many books, and I just became a book collector. And I still, buy and sell rare books, myself. And so, I just got into all this kind of stuff. And I guess I have a really diverse interests in all kinds of literature. I really like G.J. Ballard. I really like William Burroughs. I collect all their first editions. I've been collecting Jack Kerouac's first editions recently. I don't know. It's just sort of a hobby. I have about 40 bookshelves in my house. It's ridiculous. I dread moving. It'll kill me. When you hear of me dying, it'll be Richard tried to move his book collection and then he's dead. So
same thing.
I have nothing near that amount, and any time I move, it's always a big situation. A lot of them end up staying packed up permanently, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Look, I've considered opening a bookshop, to be honest. It seemed to me like a good retirement plan, where I sort of maybe when I hit 60, 65, I open a bookshop, and then, you can get old disgracefully, running a sort of, esoteric bookshop, and, but I haven't quite hit that age yet. And I've got a new film I want to make that I've been working on. And I've been hanging out with some, a couple of ex-crims because it's going to be a kind of crime film, because I tend to like those kind of films. My last film was kind of a crime film, I guess. And I've written another crime film. At the moment, it's called Wake the Chinaman, which is based on, it's sort of about a hitman who falls in love with the victim, the person he's going to kill, the woman he's going to kill. And if you think about Pearls Before Swine, that was about a hitman as well. So it's not as if it's that different in many ways. But I'm working on that at the moment. And, I've got a few people from the Melbourne crime world who are sort of advising me on it. So it's very realistic. And, I'm going to probably shoot it in that kind of dogma style I've been working in of late. And hopefully I'll make it in the next year or so if all goes well, and we'll have another film from me.
Awesome.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Just as a final word, is there any talent that's emerging that's your submissions for the Melbourne Underground Film Festival? Are there any new names that we should be on the lookout for? For example, if you just look up the winners of the Melbourne Underground Film Festival every year, they're always a good guide to, a guy called Alan King made a film called Vincent last year, which is a lot of people are putting into top tens in Australia. He's great. I'm thinking of giving him a part in my next film, maybe a major part. And so he's great. I think there was a couple of brothers called the Kublai brothers, or I might not have got that name correct, but they made this really interesting kind of, this underground movie. Obviously, at the Melbourne Underground Film Festival, we don't care, about your politics. We don't care about political correctness or anything like that. We just care is the film interesting, and we don't really care about the budget. It's it does the film show the spark of creativity and talent, and just by having that as the acceptance criteria,
We've discovered just about every important filmmaker that's come out of Australia the last 25 years. It's not the Melbourne International Film Festival. It's not the Sydney International Film Festival. It's us. And we have a budget of fucking next to nothing, and we don't get any money from the government. We're the only major film festival that doesn't get any money from the government. They all rely on the government teat. I'm just able to do it somehow. I don't know how I do it. I've just got this fuck you attitude. I don't like being told what to do, and I hate I just hate obviously political correctness has just gone out of control. I got cancelled, over some fucking comment I made about 7 or 8 years ago. I mean, which is not really that surprising. I've made 1,000 comments that I should have been cancelled for. It's just that this one happened to go viral. You know what I mean? So, but I think an artist should be provocative, and
Sure.
when I ran the club, I used to do all kinds of things. We did like come dressed as a Nazi night or whatever. And, this used to get me in trouble at the Hellfire Club and things like this. But people knew it was sort of tongue in cheek or, whatever. And being a troublemaker. And in the 90s, it was very acceptable being transgressive and that. But, it was kind of painful to see about say 30 or 40% of, people who you knew would turn against you, and these were people who were, I don't think I should name them, but, people like, I guess, Jack Sargent, who he's a writer, and others just turn against you because you've dared. These are people supposedly interested in transgressiveness, and you are being literally transgressive.
Yeah, I got the feeling that he was probably like kind of a bitch, despite recommending some already.
He's a bit of a bitch, yeah. To be perfectly honest with you, he is. But, he runs the Revelation Film Festival with a guy named Richard Sawada. That's probably the other major, independent, undergroundy kind of film festival. It's over in Perth. So, no one has ever heard of it. But they did play my film, The Last Days of Joe Blow, which was nice of them. And, I've got along with those guys throughout periods of my life. And, they're nice enough guys. But I think that is bought into the whole political correctness thing and, and of course, I'm now Richard Sawada he runs the St Kilda Film Festival, the Short Film Festival, which is a major film festival in Melbourne. But, if you play the game, these people get paid $200,000 a year in these jobs. Maybe I should have kept my mouth shut. I'd be getting $200,000 a year. I could probably be teaching at the Victorian College of Arts if I just said, if I just went along with the trans thing and, went along with every left-wing agenda, I put a dress on, I'd probably get funding tomorrow, mate. So there you go.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy, isn't it? You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people are cynical, to be perfectly honest. I think a lot of people, particularly in the genre area, which is traditionally, genre films, particularly horror films, tend to be right-wing. I don't know if you really look at what the meaning of them. For example, zombie films are all about immigrants. Zombie films are about immigrants, aren't they? It's like...
Zombie was covered, yeah.
There you go. 28 Days Later tries to hide that sort of about immigration, but it has this, 28 years later, it's got this idealistic kind of white community that's under threat from this, zombies on the mainland. This is all a metaphor for real things that are going on in our world. And
how fast it spreads now. Like in Fulci's, and how fast it spreads. Like in Fulci's Zombie, it goes from the Caribbean with all those ex-slave Negroes and conquistadors to New York in seemingly a split second. But that's the message. Yeah, it's totally internationalized.
Exactly. And that should be challenging. And I think horror films are always naturally conservative because it deals with subject matters like death and fear and things like this. And that's okay. We need all kinds of filmmakers. And what was interesting is there have been filmmakers who are of the left who have defended me. When I got in trouble, Bruce LaBruce is a gay left-wing Marxist filmmaker from Canada. He defended me. And we hung out. He was a guest at the festival. We got drunk. We did drugs together. So there you go. So we got along, and he remains on my Facebook page. And you've got to be tolerant to be on my Facebook page. Let me tell you that. You'd have to be a bit of a fan of Donald Trump, or you'd have to just unfollow me or something. Even I get sick of some Trump stuff, but anyway, it's all good fun. And there it is. Some people are tolerant. Some people on the left, when they say I preach tolerance, they actually mean it. So they don't have a problem with me. Every time I see them, it's great. They understand that I have a different political view to things, but it doesn't make me an inhuman person. And there it is.
Exactly.
So, look, it's all very interesting. And, basically, Mainly I've been about just, supporting independent filmmakers, doing my own work, and, just trying to be as interesting as possible, but obviously it's hard to get money for films. And if there's anybody out there who's a producer, I'm always looking for somebody to help me produce my work. I have about 2 or 3 new films I want to do. The first one is this kind of hitman film I want to make. And I've got this other film that's I want to make in the suburb I grew up in, which is Lower Templestowe and around there, Doncaster, which maybe is a bit like a Nora, about, prostitutes and stuff like that, so there you go. That's it. And any questions?
I had a question about Bruce LeBruce, because you got in trouble for showing LA Zombie on Muff. So how did you get out of that situation?
Well, this is what was crazy. I mean, because when I made this comment, we had a, yes and no vote in Australia about gay marriage. And I made a negative comment about that, and that's what I got cancelled over. But, like a few years before, about 3 or 4 years before, I had, played the work of Bruce LeBruce, and his film LA Zombie had been banned from the Melbourne International Film Festival. And that film festival, when it got banned, it didn't question the government's decision. I said, I think it's ridiculous, because we'd played his work before. And I said, I'm going to organise an illegal screening of, this film. I'm just you got to join this Facebook page, and, you got to give us your email address. And then, on the day of the event, we'll email you where we're playing the film. And so we did that, and it was like completely packed. It was like, we had like 400 people to a 200 seaters. We had to do 2 sessions of it, and it was a complete success. But one of them was obviously an undercover cop, so I got arrested for that, and I could have, I think the penalty for doing that was like a year in jail or something. But obviously they didn't give me that. They gave me a $750 fine, which I had to donate to the Royal Children's Hospital, and the headline was "Gay Zombie Film Benefits Sick Children." And then I sent the article to Bruce.
Oh my God.
And he said, that's my favorite headline of my career. You know what I mean? Like, gay zombie film benefits sick children. And, Bruce is actually a really nice guy. And as I said, he's quite a radical Marxist. He wants to make a film about that guy Luigi who shot the, that shot the CEO of the health company. I'll tell you, somebody on the right, I support that guy. People on the far left support that guy. Fuck people in America who exploit, the working class and these parasitic elites there who make money off people who are sick. Fuck those people, mate. Exactly. So Luigi's a hero in my fucking book, mate. And and Bruce wants to make a film about that, and I say good on him. So there's sometimes that the left and the right come together. For example, with the whole Palestine thing. I hate Israel, and all the people on the left hate Israel. So
I've interviewed him too, and he knows like my site, Swaston, is full of all it's totally opposite politics, but he respects me enough. I respect him enough to meet somewhere. You know what I mean? Same thing with like somebody like Arian Kaganoff, who we also covered on here.
Exactly. So, it's crazy. All my far left people during the whole, after October 7, when, Israel's been committing this genocide in Gaza, they've all been coming up to me going, you're right. Everything you've been saying for 30 years is right. I can't believe it.
It's amazing. Like the left used to be Jews get a full pass on everything, like blind worship of Jews left like 20 years ago. Now it's like they're totally flipped.
I even have Jewish friends, who are quite tolerant, of me. I have some who are pro-Zionist, and I have some who are anti. A guy who I did a chat show with, Richard Lowenstein. He's a lefty, anti-Zionist Jew. Lives in Melbourne. He's quite a good filmmaker. He made that film. What is it called again? It had Michael Hutchins in it. Anyway, it was about Sam Sajafka. It was called Dogs in Space. That's a great film, made in the 80s. Check that out. And, he's a nice guy. And, I just think it's good to be tolerant of other people's views. I certainly tolerate, people's views who I disagree with. And actually, to be honest, I find sometimes it interesting to have conversations with people who don't always agree with me. So, it's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, any other questions?
Did you hung out with Coyle, right? Sleazy, and if I recall, like I'm going off memory. You know the guys from Coyle?
I got Sleazy stories as well. Yep. He is just obviously I'm a huge Throbbing Gristle fan. Originally, in my film Pearls Before Swine, Kenneth Anger was going to be in it. he'd been a guest at the my Hellfire Club, and I'd met him when he came out to do a film show in Australia in the 90s. Kenneth Anger was going to be in my film Pearls Before Swine, but that didn't happen. And then when he fell out, Boyd suggested Genesis from, Throbbing Gristle. So I wrote to him, and then I received a letter back on Process, the Process Church, the Final Judgment. It was on Process letterhead, which sort of scared me at the time, because I just read The Ultimate Evil, and I thought, oh my God, this is that group, that satanic group involved in murdering people. But, obviously I don't think that's the case with the Process. But anyway, at the time, but for whatever reason, that didn't happen either. But so in the end, we actually rewrite the script so that Boyd was sort of sent to kill himself. But originally, Morton Buggs was actually meant to be a separate character. It was originally meant to be played by Kenneth Anger and then Genesis. But neither of them ended up were able to come out at the time we were shooting, etc. So it didn't happen. And, but then I sort of got to know that circle a little bit, and then somehow I got onto Sleazy. And one of the times I was in Thailand, I knew he was living in Thailand, so we went and hung out. I was one of the few people to visit his compound. He lived in he lived next to a Thai military base, because he was gay, of course. So he would sit there and look at these, 20-year-old Thai men every morning from his villa. He'd sip tea, and then he had a halfway house in a way. It was maybe an acre. And it was like a big sort of tower in the middle where he did his work. That was where he made his music. Then he had a living area. Then he had almost a stables. Then he had bunk beds. And then he would just allow, young Thai men to come and stay there. There was about 10 young men living there. I don't know, age between 18 and 25. And these were his kind of sex slaves, I imagine. And, so he was having a wild time over there. So anyway, we got to visit him, and he had a little part in my film, The Beautiful and Damned. He played a lawyer, and we actually shot some scenes over in Bangkok with him, where we went onto a rooftop bar, and then I conducted a 1-hour interview with him, which was very, very candid about what he was up to over there. But I have that somewhere on a mini DV type. I've got to release that. A biographer of Sleazy contacted me recently, so I'm going to pass that on to him. I've got to go into my archives and dig all this stuff out. But we got along great, and he was going to be in the film The Second Coming, but he passed away. I was coming to Thailand, I don't know. I said I'll be there in 6 months. He said, "Oh, I'll do so. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do." So that's just the kind of person he was. And I remember he'd never toured Australia. As I said, I toured Crispin Glover, and I said, well, he had this band called the Threshold Houseboys Choir, which is basically just him with a synthesizer and a theremin and a video show. So we toured that. We played him at the Toffin Town, and that's the only tour the Sleazy ever did of Australia, which was quite groundbreaking. And obviously that was packed, and that was great. So, I've been very lucky over the years to meet so many, people I've admired, and to be able to, tour with them, or help them do something in Australia, whether it be attend Muff or put on a concert, or Boyd Rice put on a concert in Melbourne. When I was doing Hellfire Club in the 90s, I was at a venue called The Mansion, and I just said, "You want to do a non-concert?" And then I said to Doug, "Do you want to do a Death in June concert?" And they both said yes. So at this kind of nightclub venue that plays house music, on one Friday or Saturday night, there was this bloody folk music in June. That's a one-off. That's the only time that's ever happened in Australia. So there you go. That was good.
Just one more question about the Joe Blow documentary. I was blown away. Is that bit with the Mike Tierney claiming to be the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley real, or were you guys trying to play it up for the documentary a bit, make fun of it?
Well, I think at the time he believed that, and I mean who knows? Maybe maybe he is, but I think he was maybe taking a few too many drugs, and he did kind of. I don't think he'd mind me talking about this. He had sort of a nervous breakdown when he quit the porn business. When I went to make The Last Days of Joe Blow, because I'm not somebody who's negative about pornography. I thought pornography, I was pro-pornography. But, I actually got to see it's sort of a dark world in many ways. And many of the people, when we were in LA, when he was part of the porn scene, we hung out, and it was all very bubbly and light and fun and party, and Hunter Thompson and all that kind of stuff. But then, later on, I heard about what happened to various people. One of the guys in the film killed himself, jumped off some bridge in Los Angeles about 3 or 4 years after the film, and other porn actresses, they OD, they die, whatever,
Right.
and he sort of had a nervous breakdown after that. He moved to Las Vegas after he quit porn. He didn't go straight to Thailand. And I remember I turned up at his house one time in Las Vegas, and the whole house was decked out in plastic. It was like he was going to murder me, and he'd done it to cover the blood, which didn't exactly make me feel like that confident about thing. But he didn't murder me. We just hung out, and I tried to, just say, look, you don't need to be paranoid. But he said something like the cartel was out to get him because he was involved with a thing called Porn WikiLeaks, which was like a porn version of WikiLeaks, and he had helped fund that or something. A guy named I can't remember the guy's name. It'll come to me. But his interview is in Last Days of Joe Blow. He was a friend of Michael's, and he was the main guy behind it. But that porn WikiLeaks had leaked on a lot of people in the porn scene, and obviously, there's mafia money involved in that, and there's also cartel money involved in it. So I think he was worried about that. So one time I turn up to meet him in Las Vegas, and he's not there, and his house is kind of just sort of open, and there are these two Mexican dudes just kind of watching the house in a car. And I'm like, oh, fuck, you know what I mean? Because he's told me this whole story. So then I go back to my hotel. I'm thinking, he's gone missing. Have I been followed back to my hotel? I'm getting paranoid myself. But then the next day he turns up. He'd just gone out and, left his door unlocked or something stupid like that. You know what I mean? So it was all okay. I just think, he had a bit of a few mental health issues in that period, and he went to Thailand and felt better, and he's over there. His mother moved over there now, so they're living happily over in Thailand. So good luck to them, and he still gets residuals from Reservoir Dogs, I think. So very good.
Great.
Yeah, good for him.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. No, he's a nice guy, and he remains a friend. And he does the website for the Melbourne Underground Film Festival to this day. So he works on that for me. So it's good to stay in contact with friends. And next time I'm in Thailand, I'll go catch up with him again. So but yeah, look, most of my films outside of The Second Coming are available. You can get them. On Amazon, or you can order them. Pearls Before Swine, the best copy to get is probably from Soleil Moon, who released Death in June in America. Soleil Moon distribution. They have a $9.95 copy. That's the official version. I split the money we make from that with Boyd Rice. It goes half to me, half to Boyd. And, so just go pick up a copy. It's like $10. It's like nothing. And, it's a lovely DVD copy of the film. And, my new film, The Debt Collectors, has come out on Blu-ray, and also my first film, Bloodlust, has just come out on Redemption Films from Nigel Wingrove over there, who does the Redemption label. You might be familiar with it. They specialise in horror and vampire films. So it's great to have Bloodlust on that label, because when we made Bloodlust, we were inspired by that label to some extent. So it's really good to see it finally come out there. So, and there it is, guys.
Thank you, Richard, for joining us and giving us your story. This was fantastic.
Yes,
thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you.
Well, it's great. I hope I've been candid, but not too candid. And if I've been too candid, my apologies to anyone I've mentioned who didn't want to be mentioned. So
No, don't
great
worry,
talking
don't
to you guys, and it's very nice that you appreciate my films. And I want to thank you for having a chat today.